This video is about multiple investments and calculating the effective annual yield of those investments. Suppose you want to invest $1,000 in the stock market. 1 year later, that stock is worth $1,200. That means in 1 year's time, you gained $200. That's a 20% increase in your investment. In order for you to have gained the same amount of money by investing in any other kind of account, you would have had to have earned 20% interest compounded annually, and that's called the effective annual yield. So let's look at it in terms of our function. The amount after t years is given by the principal times 1 plus r over n raised to the nt. However, for this particular example, and these examples, since we're talking about annual compounding, the n becomes 1, and so this function simplifies to simply p times 1 plus r raised to the t. For this particular problem, our a of 1 is equal to 1,000 times 1 plus r raised to the 1, and that's going to equal $1,200. 1,000 was the principal, that was the initial investment. 1 plus r would be your effective interest rate there, raised to the 1 because it's only been in there for 1 year and it's worth $1,200. So solving this equation for r, your 1 plus r raised to the 1 is equal to 1,200 over 1,000. That equation simplifies on both sides to 1 plus r is equal to 1.2. And subtracting 1 from both sides, you get r is 0.2, that's 20%, and so that is your effective annual yield. Again, that one you can see from simple logic up here, but also applying the formula, you can see how it works out. So let's modify this problem. Suppose instead of 1 year, it took 2 years for the account to be worth that much, for that stock to grow to $1,200. You still increased by $200, but it took 2 years. So what was your effective annual yield of the account now? Again, applying the formula, a of t is p times 1 plus r raised to the t, I know that this has had 2 years to grow. And so from the formula, the value of the account should be 1,000 times 1 plus r raised to the 2. Your t is now 2. And I know this value is $1,200. So I need to solve this equation for r. Divide both sides by 1,000. That gives you 1.2 on the right. Square root both sides. You could say, well, shouldn't it be plus or minus square root over here? The negative square root does not make sense in the context of this problem because you've actually gained money, which means you've got 1 plus r is the square root of 1.2. Subtract 1 from both sides, and you get approximately 0.0954, which is 9.54%, so your effective annual yield is about 9.54%. So realistically, as I mentioned in class, it's going to be more than just a single investment. You're going to have multiple investments. So let's revise this once more and say you invest $1,000 in the stock market, and a year later you invest $1,200 in the stock market. And then a year after that, it's worth $2,800. Well, the $1,000 has had 2 years to grow, and the $1,200 has had 1 year to grow. So how do you calculate the effective annual yield of your investments overall? Well, the $1,000, I know from my formula, is going to be worth 1,000 times 1 plus r squared, just like I did in the previous problem. The $1,200 is going to be 1,200 times 1 plus r raised to the 1, because it's only had 1 year to grow. And overall, when you add those two amounts together, you're going to have $2,800. So, written as an equation, you've got the first one, 1,000 times 1 plus r squared, plus the second one, that's 1,200 times 1 plus r to the 1 is equal to 2,800. Expanding, combining like terms, and simplifying, you're going to end up with this quadratic equation. So although you're using an exponential function to figure out what each investment's worth, it boils down to then and simplifies to a quadratic equation, in this case, a polynomial equation. So combining both worlds here. And solving a quadratic equation, I know I can do just by applying applying the quadratic formula. So first I simplified the equation a little bit just by dividing everything on both sides by 100, just to simplify my coefficients since it worked out nice there. And so applying the quadratic formula, that would be the solution, which simplifies to, as a decimal, 0.1776 or negative 3.3776. That's equivalent to 17.76% or negative 337.76%. Now, when you look at that second solution, negative 337.76%, you're not going to lose more money than you invested. So that makes no sense in the context of this problem. Besides, I actually gained money from my investment. I invested a total of $2,200 and it's now worth $2,800. So negative makes no sense at all. So throw that out. I'm left with 17.76%. That is my effective annual yield.